the Sahara wasn't always a desert. Long ago, the climate was wetter, with lakes and rivers across areas that are today sand. Archaeologists call this the African humid period, and people used to live around those waters. What remains today is known to many as the Eye of the Sahara. It isn't an impact crater, even though from space it looks like one, and its perfect, mysterious ring shape makes many believe it could be linked to the lost city of Atlantis. The Richat structure is a place in the western Sahara Desert of Mauritania. Many people know it by another name, the Eye of the Sahara. It sits on the Adrar Plateau, about 500 kilometers from Mauritania's Atlantic coast, not far from the historic towns of Ouadaine and Chinguetti. The Eye lies deep inland, surrounded by dunes, rocky plateaus, and dry valleys called wadis. It is about 40 to 50 kilometers across, depending on how you measure the rings. The pattern is made of alternating hard and soft rock that erosion carved into arcs and bowls. From the ground, it looks like low ridges and shallow valleys. From the sky, it looks like a perfect target painted on the desert. Tracks and dirt roads cross the plateau, but the center of the Eye remains remote. You can only see the full circle from high above. That's why pilots and astronauts have photographed it for decades. NASA crews have captured many images showing its rings framed by long fields of dunes. On the ground, you feel its shape more than you see it, walking over curved ridges and open flats without ever glimpsing the whole ring at once. Only later, when you look at your GPS track, do you realize you've walked along an arc your eyes could never take in. To understand why this place is so interesting to so many people, you have to imagine the Sahara as it was during its last green age. Between roughly 1500 and 5000 years ago, northern Africa went through a long humid period. Monsoons shifted north, rain fell where today there is almost none, lakes filled valleys, rivers ran across the sand, and animals like crocodiles and hippos lived where the dunes are now. People hunted, herded, and fished. They left rock carvings of cattle, elephants, and even chariots on stone faces that still stand above the sands. As the climate changed and the rains moved south, it became a vast desert, and the people moved with it. In that greener world, the Eye sat in the middle of a living landscape. It was not a harbor or a crater. It was a natural ringed dome rising from the plateau. The structure is a geological dome that has been deeply eroded over time. It formed when molten material below the surface pushed up layers of sedimentary rock long ago. The uplift created a broad dome, and over millions of years, wind and water shaved that dome down. Hard rocks such as quartzite remained as ring-shaped ridges, while softer layers eroded into lower ground between them. The result is a series of concentric rings that look like ripples from a stone dropped in water. The center of the Eye contains a siliceous breccia, a type of broken rock fused together, along with igneous rocks such as rhyolite and gabbro. Geologists have mapped 2 concentric ring dikes of gabbro within the Eye. The inner one is about 30 meters wide and roughly 3 kilometers from the center, and the outer one is about 70 meters wide and sits around 8 kilometers out. They've also found carbonatite and kimberlite intrusions, dated to about 94 to 104 million years ago for the carbonatites and around 99 million years for the kimberlite. Although it looks like an impact crater from space, studies found no evidence of shock features from a meteor strike. A reported impact mineral turned out to be a misidentified common mineral when it was rechecked in the 1960s. Instead, the evidence points to uplift, intrusion, hydrothermal activity, and a very long history of erosion. For that reason, geologists classify the structure as a magmatic alkaline complex and an eroded dome, not a crater. Today, it's recognized as a geological heritage site, a textbook example of this kind of formation. When rain does visit this part of the desert, water collects in the lower rings and runs out along the wadis. The outer ring holds the main paths where surface water once ran. Along that ring, archaeologists find many ancient stone tools. Some belong to the Acheulean period, known for its large hand axes from early humans. There are also Middle Stone Age Aterian tools made by modern humans during the late Pleistocene. Most of these artifacts are found on the outermost ring near wadis like Akerdil and Bamourer. They usually lie on the surface because wind has blown away fine sediments and left heavier pieces behind. The sediments around the eye include layers that formed in the late Pleistocene and early Holocene, the time of the recent humid period. These layers contain freshwater fossils and date to between about 15,000 and 8,000 years ago. That means shallow lakes and pools existed here during wetter times. It doesn't mean there was a city inside the rings, only that people came here when water was available. Ridges in and around the eye often show deeply weathered surfaces. These are ancient soils turned to rock, signs of warm and wet times before the modern desert formed. In some places, the old wet layers have hardened into crusts of calcrete. Elsewhere, they appear as thin beds of gravel and mud from ancient river channels. Across the wider Adrar region, stone burial mounds of many kinds dot the land. A few have been studied closely, so their ages are still unknown. Rock carvings in the region show horses, hunters, chariots, and animals such as elephants and bovids. These scenes match a time when grasslands and wetlands supported herding and hunting. Later, when the desert dried and trans-Saharan trade grew, towns like Oadain and Chinguetti became caravan centers and kept libraries of manuscripts. The eye sat to the east of these routes and remained a landmark for travelers. It has been part of the human story of this region for a very long time. Now we turn to the legend that keeps drawing people back to the eye. Around 360 BCE, the Greek philosopher Plato wrote two dialogues called Timaeus and Critias. In those works, he described a powerful island civilization called Atlantis. He said it was located beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. He described the capital city built in concentric rings. There were 2 rings of land and 3 rings of water around the central island, with a palace and sanctuary. He also mentioned a great rectangular plain nearby and high mountains to the north that protected it from cold winds. He described canals cut with measured widths and depths, and a short channel from the city to the sea. He dated the events to 9,000 years before his time, and he said the story came from Egypt. At the end of the story, Atlantis fell out of favor with the gods and was destroyed by floods and earthquakes in a single day and night. Most classicists and historians read this as a philosophical tale meant to teach lessons, not as a real record of history. Plato used Atlantis to talk about power, pride, and the downfall of great societies. Still, his descriptions were so vivid that people have spent centuries trying to find a real place that matches them. Supporters of the eye equals Atlantis idea start with the shape. Plato described a city made of rings, and the eye is a landscape of rings. Its raised and low areas are sometimes compared to land and water. Erosional channels on the southern side are said to resemble an outlet to the sea, and wadis leading away from the structure are taken as signs that water once flowed out. The broader Western Sahara also shows evidence of an ancient river system that reached the Atlantic during wetter ages. Some believe that, in the Green Sahara, rivers from the Adrar Plateau could have joined that network. Mountains and high plateaus north and east of the eye are seen as possible matches for Plato's protective mountains. The overall size of the formation roughly fits some of the larger estimates of Atlantis' capital. In the Adrar region, rock carvings of horses, bulls, and elephants are said to echo the animals in Plato's story. Another link is the name Atlas. The Atlas Mountains lie far to the north, and ancient writers connected a mythic King Atlas with Mauritania, the old name for part of northwest Africa. In Plato's account, the first king of Atlantis was also named Atlas. To some, all these connections, names, shapes, and symbols feel too strong to be coincidence. The eye becomes, in their view, the remains of a great harbor city buried by time and sand. They suggest that floods and centuries of dryness erased the built structures, leaving only the natural rings. Plato's canal to the sea, said to be 50 stadia long, or about 9 kilometers, is reinterpreted as a shortened memory of a longer route through a once wet Sahara. According to this line of thought, later copyists may have changed distances, but the story's main features survived. The case against the eye being Atlantis starts with its location. The structure lies about 500 kilometers from today's Atlantic coast. Plato City, however, had a harbor and a short canal leading straight to the sea. To make the eye fit, you'd have to imagine a very different coastline or a long canal that Plato never mentioned. Next is the geology. The eye is extremely old. Its rocks formed hundreds of millions of years before humans existed. Its rings were shaped by uplift and erosion, not by people building walls or canals. No signs of a drowned harbor, stone docks, bridges, or city foundations have ever been found inside the rings. Archaeologists who've studied the area do not report a buried Bronze Age or Neolithic city within the circles. Instead, they find scattered tools and natural sediments that match seasonal water and wind at different times. Scale is another problem. Plato gives specific dimensions for canals, ring widths, and the surrounding plain. For example, he wrote that the canal was about 50 stadia long, roughly 9 kilometers, and the plain was 3,000 by 2,000 stadia, or hundreds of kilometers across. Even if you translate ancient units generously or allow for possible copying errors, those numbers don't match the eye or its surroundings. Another issue is geography and names. The Atlas Mountains that carry the name connected to Atlas are hundreds of kilometers away in a different part of North Africa. Ancient Mauritania, the place tied to mythic King Atlas, lay along the coasts of what are now Morocco and Algeria. That is not the same as modern Mauritania, where the eye is located. The names sound alike, but the places are not the same. And finally, there is the purpose of Plato's story. Most scholars agree Atlantis was a moral tale, not a historical record. If that's true, looking for a perfect match in the desert misses the point of what Plato was trying to say. Even with all the doubts, the story of the Green Sahara does add useful context. During wetter times, much of the Western Sahara was covered with lakes, rivers, and wetlands. A major ancient river, often called the Tamanrasset, once flowed from the highlands in the Central Sahara to the Atlantic Ocean. It cut a deep underwater canyon off the coast of Mauritania, known as the Cap Timorous Canyon. That river came and went with the monsoon, and could have provided a wide corridor for people, animals, and ideas to move. In wet times, wadis around the Adrar Plateau would have carried seasonal flows. Shallow lakes likely formed in the low rings of the eye, where people could camp, hunt, herd, and gather. Simple stone shelters, animal pens, and paths may have lined the drier edges. When the climate dried out around 6,000 to 5,000 years ago, those water systems disappeared. The desert spread again, covering old riverbeds and filling valleys with dunes. Standing on a ridge today, it's hard to imagine this land once echoed with the sounds of frogs at night, but the fossils and sediments prove it did. This background explains why the eye attracts big theories. It's a striking natural shape in a place that was once full of water. It lies in a region with deep human history and huge climate changes. Nearby rock art and burials prove that people lived here when the Sahara was green. For those fascinated by the mystery of Atlantis, the eye seems like the perfect place to imagine the story. Whether or not you connect it to Atlantis, the Eye of the Sahara is a remarkable place. It's a natural laboratory for seeing how volcanic activity, uplift, and erosion can shape the land into giant rings. It's a record of climate swings that turned the desert green and then dried it again. It's a window into deep human history on the edge of the Sahara, a place of stone tools, rock art, and ancient movement. The eye is beautiful from space and mysterious on the ground. It makes us wonder about memory, myth, and our place in time. And maybe the real mystery isn't Atlantis, but this place itself, a ring of stone shaped by time, a record of water and wind, and a reminder of how far curiosity can take us.